right, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is Game Studio. You know, the UI, like I said, is it's programmer art right now, but that's okay because it's actually a tool for that. So, you know, you saw the GDC was very, very rough. It's slightly less rough. The idea is that you can actually lay out and make an entire small game using nothing but your iPad. So we actually kind of scrapped the original idea of, oh, you're going to write code and you can push a button to run it, and that's okay and all. But Apple would never approve it, obviously, because heaven forbid anything get out there that they can't keep an eye on. So we changed this idea. We want to make it even easier. So we have this idea of scene. So I'm just going to load up my current scene. And so you can load a scene, and you know everything in the scene is just a sprite, and you can move them around. You can place them wherever you want, and you can actually play the scene for a while. And you can reset it. And so everything here is actually, well, the artwork is the ground from Jetpack Dragon.
Oh, cool.
This is a little guy that I had my artist whip up in his hotel room last night because I was like, crap, I'm supposed to be showing this, give me art. So we're actually going to do two things here. We're going to add another sprite to this scene, and it's going to use the ARM class, and here's the actual image, and we'll name it ARM. So here's my ARM, and it's gonna let's put it right up over there, and then if you play, you know, the ARM and it shoots, and this is my guy. And I was actually gonna have this little great game where you can, you know, move around and aim at the incoming aliens and blow them up, but again, clients work, having to pay bills happens.
So how would this compare to something like Game Salad or something like that? I mean, is it feature-wise?
Well, and so the engine behind it is actually incredibly robust. It can do almost everything. It's powered by an awesome Lua scripting backend that we may or may not be able to expose.
Okay, depending on Apple's approval.
So you can come here. There's a script editor where you can actually, you know, line by line edit and write Lua code and save it out, and that may or may not actually make it because of them. I apologize for the absolutely terrible image editor because I made it. And I don't do UI, but you know, you can actually go in and you can say, well, okay, this guy actually has 8 frames and step through the frames of animation, and
so that's cool. And you can like edit the pixel art in there.
Yeah,
and everything?
So I could actually like say, well, I want, you know, this screen right here, and I'm going to paint around over here. And
cool.
If I had wanted to make my artist cry, I could hit the save button, but I'm not going to do that for now. So I'll actually, and then you know, we have our. So here's, for instance, that ARM asset. And it was, you know, 2 frames, so standard and shooting. And then, so this is the actual cool thing here. It's calling it the visual editor. And so I'm actually going to load up that ARM. And so instead of writing code, you actually have this entire like simple flow chart of actual actions that everything take place.
That's really neat.
So in this case, you know, when the ARM is initialized, it calls set animation, which obviously it needs to be cleaned up, needs documentation, but all this says is that, you know, it's laid out in a 2x1 sprite sheet and play frames 0 to 1 and wait 4 frames between animation. We actually have the soldier, which is slightly more complex. He makes himself control. We have like the BG scroll is probably the more interesting because you actually see we have this kind of slightly more complex flowchart going on.
That's really interesting how that's handled. I mean, that's
and so you actually, you know,
pretty
again,
complicated stuff that you've managed to make really simple.
Well, and again, this idea here, I'll show you. I mean, I'm not going to. So you have, again, this will be prettier, I promise, but it's program art, it's in progress. So you can literally actually just do things like you say, well, I want to get the position of this thing, and you just drag out from this little node down here, and you literally can just chain these behaviors.
It almost works
together.
like a version of Automator for OS X. Same kind of logic.
It kind of took from that. There's a number of tools out there. All of the big game engines have this functionality in their AI editors. And so we thought it would be interesting if, well, let's say we do something very similar to this, only let's make it usable on the iPad, and let's actually do full games with it and see what we can do.
Well, now, once you, like, if you've invested hours and hours and hours into this, like, how do you get your game off of your iPad now?
So the one good thing about doing this is, even though it generates actual code based on this, don't tell Apple that, it's all technically just loading XML files, which is one of those files that we can convince Apple, look, it's just data, it's not code.
Right.
So it actually connects through iTunes.
Okay.
You can all those sprites I dragged on weren't drawn in this because the image editor kind of sucks right now. They were just dragged in through iTunes file sharing.
Okay, cool.
So my artist emailed them to me, I dragged them into iTunes, it copied on here, and then when I came in here and said, well, I want to add a new sprite, there's all the sprites I could pick from.
Okay, great.
And so the idea is that we're trying to figure exactly the best way it's going to happen, but effectively you'll be able to either export out a bundle directly from Game Studio here, or just copy all the files out, zip them up, And again, it's one of those things we're trying to figure out the details. But the idea is that we'll be able to ship you back, like, here's an Xcode project
Right.
that with all of your data and your scripts that you can basically build, sign, and submit. And so the idea is, I mean, the original idea was a game jam in a box. I want to be able to go to a game jam with nothing but my iPad and actually be able to crank out one of those little 24-hour projects, not need to lug my laptop around. And because, I mean, the cool thing about this is, you know, you can test here, you can look at the various objects in your scene, but you can also just flip it around here and play full screen like you would normally. And so the idea here is that you can actually play it right there, come back, stop the action, go back, actually edit one of your scripts, and you can actually just tweak and really mess with it as you're going. So if you're at one of those game jams and you have 24 hours to crank something out, you can sit there with your iPad and actually just crank something out and
So
play
now,
around with it.
I mean, like best case scenario, when do you think this will be released?
So, as mentioned by the clients getting in the way of me doing a better demo right now, you know, we're slammed. Obviously we have paid work we have to do. We have to pay the bills. We're not quite living that indie dream yet. We'll get to that in the next couple things I got to show you, but it's probably going to be about the end of the year kind of thing.
Cool.
We have quite a bit to do. Obviously, the UI needs to be a lot better. We're planning on doing a series of YouTube videos with it that show, here's an example of making a simple version of this kind of game with this tool, just so that people can look at these videos and say, well, great, I'm going to download the sample project because we're going to offer some sample projects. I'm going to watch the video. I'm going to see how they made this happen, so now I can make my own game with this tool. And now I can program from my iPad using nothing but my iPad.